We're live. How about that? We are live. It's even better. Tonight we want to talk about organization, and mainly we want to focus kind of on how organization can be beneficial when you're doing a new project or something for the first time. And I get this question a lot. I get comments a lot about, hey, this is my first time. I'm swapping an lesson, taking one apart, putting it together, doing a cam swap, swapping springs, whatever the new thing is. Particularly with things like double overhead cam motors, like getting everything lined up and stuff. And we've talked about that in the past where, hey, I don't want to do that. Guys with Coyotes, I'm not swapping the cams. I'm just going to add boost. I'm not going to swap cams. And then you get people that say, as a tangent to what we're really talking about, you get people that say, well, cams don't do anything. So somehow with that particular double overhead cam motor, the OEMs figured out the bestest, most powerful camshaft you could possibly get, and you can't get any better than that. So if you change the cam timing in that motor, it doesn't make any more power. We know that that's obviously nonsense, and yet there are people there that will say stuff like that. And now we can come back to the reason why they're saying that is because people get concerned about doing these kinds of swaps, doing something for the first time. Everybody's like this. I'm like this. Almost everybody out there's like this. We don't want to do that for the first time. We don't want to learn to dance. We don't want to learn to break dance. Although learning to break dance would be awesome. But nobody wants to go through that short period of time where we aren't good at what we're doing. We're awkward, that sort of thing. We don't want to make mistakes. We don't want people to think that we're not perfect or amazing or whatever. The reality is that you don't get to that point. You don't get to the I'm really good point. I can swap camshafts in my sleep until you swapped a whole bunch of them. And during that period of time, you've made mistakes and you've learned from those mistakes because you've made them, and either was costly time or money because you ruined your dyno session, you ruined, broke something on the motor, whatever. But because of that, it taught you something. Those ones are always expensive. But that's what we call experience. And then when you do it over and over and over again, you don't make those mistakes and you get better at it. You learn new things to make you even better. But we all have to start at the beginning. And so the photo that I have up is a photo of a disassembled, I think it's a B16 head with all the parts removed from it. And then we had taken and ported it and we had cleaned it. And I didn't port it. Somebody else had ported it, somebody that knows how to port the heads. So they had done that. So we had to disassemble the whole thing, have it cleaned, and then you have to put it back together. So you clean everything that's there, organize everything. All the same things go together, all the lash adjusters, the cam towers, all the bolts, all that stuff. Everything's together. So that, you could look at them and go, oh, I'm supposed to have 10 of those, and I only have 9. Where's the other one? So before you even start putting it together and then get frustrated because you don't have one of the bolts that you need, you go find that and you solve all those problems. That's part of what organization is. And when you have all those parts and they're all there laid out for you and cleaned, and in our case with cams and stuff, they would be oiled and ready to go. And you put all that stuff together. If that's all of the parts that go in the motor, and when you're done assembling it, if you have something left, you'll know what it is because it will be there. Oh, look, there's a valve seal. Well, that needed to be in there. Now we have to go through and look, take all the springs off and stuff, and you could look in there and see which one of them doesn't have a valve seal in it. So you put the valve seal in it, a lash adjuster, a retainer, a keeper. Keepers are something, because when you're putting those on, it's easy to, we call them bejesus keepers, because when you're putting them on, if you release the spring compressor before it's ready to go, that shoots somewhere. And if you've ever tried to find a small black keeper from anything, a Honda or LS or whatever. On the 4-valve stuff, they're even smaller because of the valve diameters. That shoots somewhere, and you're just trying to listen for it and figure, okay, where roughly in the shop did that go? And if you're doing it on a table, it gets behind the table, to the side of the table, underneath stuff, so it becomes problematic. But if you have all those pieces and they're all laid out, and they're all clean, they're all there, it's easier to put them together. And now with the phones that we have and the ability to really record what you're doing when you take it apart. For me, one of the first steps in learning how to put something together is take it apart. And so I like taking pictures and video of taking something apart, especially for the first time. If it's a engine family that I haven't worked with, I like working with new stuff. So we take apart a new engine family, take pictures of it, we take it apart, we go, oh, look, I don't like with an LS or a small block 4 or some of these other engine families, I can just look at any of the bolts that came off there. I'm like, oh yeah, that's a valve cover bolt, that's a front cover bolt, that's a valley cover bolt, that's a knock sensor. What those all are. For me, what I do, even with LS stuff, even as many LSs as I've taken apart and put back together for ring gap or whatever, when I take a junkyard motor apart, especially if we're going to clean it or whatever, I take and bag everything. And I take all the bolts for the front cover and put them in their own Ziploc bag and label it FC, that's front cover. Valley cover, valve cover, rear cover, oil pan, put the timing gear and all that stuff and all those bolts together, the front, the cam retaining plate, all that stuff. That goes sealed in its own bag and gets labeled. And then all of that stuff goes in a box, or anymore now would be even better, a tote that says, hey, this is the L33 5.3 liter aluminum motor. And so it gets labeled. So I know which one it is, because there's a lot of LS motors that I might have apart. And so if it just says LS, okay, there's a whole bunch of those. But if you label all those, again, when you go to put it back together, you're like, okay, where's the timing chain? Where are the 4 bolts that hold the cam retaining plate on? Where are the 3 bolts that hold the timing gear on? All of that's there because you took it apart and were conscientious and have the bag that says this is timing chain bag, and all that stuff is there. Same thing with the oil pump. Where are the bolts that hold the oil pump on? Where's the one that holds the 2 nuts and the small 10 millimeter that hold the pickup tube to the pump and to the main studs? All of that stuff is, if it's together and you've taken photos of what it looked like when it was there, you're golden. You just have to know when you're taking it apart. The other thing that you do when you take it apart, if you take a picture of everything that you remove before you remove it, you'll also have a sequence, and then that will help you remember. Can I put the lifters in before I put the heads on? When do I put the trays on? All of these things can be answered when you document this stuff through the art of organization, even for the first time. And then after you do that, you can store all that stuff and have that and go, hey, I can refer back to this, like a video up on YouTube or whatever. I can refer back to this and learn this over and over again. I did this when I first started going into doing engines. There were a couple of how to rebuild like a small block Chevy. There were a couple of those articles in CarCraft and Hot Rod back in the day. And I would read it over and over and over and over again and just try to memorize all the photos so that I knew the one that I was going to do, because I had a Camaro. I had a split bumper Camaro. So I knew that if I was going to work on an engine, it was going to be that one. And that's the one that I wanted to modify. So I wanted to know how to take it apart. And if I went through they went through a whole disassembly and then an assembly, if I knew, if I familiarized myself, basically I was studying like I did for a test when I was in college and in high school and stuff. And so that I would understand that. And when I took it apart, like, okay, this is how you take cylinder heads off, and make sure you take the bottom bolts off and don't try to pry the head out and snap the head. Make sure you do that. Here's how you do all the rockers, and here's how you readjust them, and here's how you do the lash on them, and here's what you do to the oil pump to make sure that you prime it and don't put a dry oil pump in. All of these things you familiarize yourself with, and I did that over and over and over again before I even like turned a wrench on the motor. I did all that stuff. But like I said, new motors, and I do lots of new ones. I just had a new one show up, the mystery motor. It will go through the same procedure. I'll take photos of everything and video of everything, and then when I take it apart, everything will be labeled, because I've never taken that motor apart before. Don't know it. Have any idea what size head bolts or studs it would have in it, what the valve cover bolts look like, what the rockers look like, all that stuff. If it even has rockers or overhead cam bolts. I don't know what any of those are. But when I take it apart and label them, I'll know what they are. Like I said, it also helped tell me, hey, how do you put this thing back together? When you want to put it back together, we're naturally going to want to make, since whatever it is, it's going to be stock. We're naturally going to want to make upgrades to it, because otherwise, what's the point? I mean, it's cool to run stock ones. Like I could go back and get an LS6 or an LS7, which I have an LS6 in my garage that I'm putting together. And when I say putting together, mostly it's just sitting there and I haven't done anything with it, but it needs to be put back together. But when you go to put it back together, and you need to know what you're doing, but we're going to, like some of the stock ones would be cool to put back together, but this one is not that. We want to modify it and make more power. So we'll definitely do that. And it will get all the things, it will get boost and all that stuff. So it will be cool. And I don't, on this particular one, I don't even have to make a super Ritchie intake manifold for it, because as luck would have it, there's already a super Ritchie intake available for it. And we'll talk about that later on when we get into what that is and how that's possible. It's very, very cool. So we'll see what you guys got going on. I don't have any t-shirts for giveaway tonight. So people that came here just for that, obviously we didn't announce any of that, but we gave away 4 of them already. So that's pretty good. And I got all of those shipped out already. So if you are waiting for a shirt, and that's, R. Kelly, Jim Ashcraft, James Holbrook, and then Binary. So, all of those are sent out, and I actually sent out all of the cams. I think I got a couple of more orders after I got back from UPS today. So all of those will have to go out tomorrow for any ones we have. Bag and tag it. That's right. Bag them and tag them. So here we go. Okay, do you label bolts and pieces during engine disassembly to make it easier to clean and assemble? Engines assemble. Be nice if you could just call that out and have it assemble itself. That would be awesome. That would be awesomeness. It's good to organize your cams to find out which one is the wrong cam. I have one pile of cams, and it just says wrong cam, and I just put all of them there. Daryl, I don't really know what you mean by thoughts on your question. Eric, you did double yo, so you did yo-yo. That's all good. I'm old school. I'm Duncan Imperial or Butterfly. If you want to walk the dog, for all my yo-yo people out there, this is exactly what I kind of thought. I just watched your 4.8 liter NSR video. I'm going with springs, lifters, push rods, and some other goodies. Gotta just dive into it head first. Yeah, a cam swap on an LS. There's lots and lots of videos up on in internet land for that stuff, and it shouldn't be. You should be able to get through that pretty good. How to get an ad already? Kill for a split bumper Camaro. I know. I mean, obviously, I have a soft spot since that was my first car. I really like those. I like those better than any of the other earlier year Camaros. Although I do like the others, 67, 68, 69. I like all of those too. But like I said, I'm a split bumper guy. Still amazed how the Truck Norris NSR cam only lost 7 horsepower to the SR cam, to a springs required cam. That's good. I'm looking at getting the comp cams 459, 799 heads. What springs you recommend? I don't know. You're going to need some that go more than 600 lift. So I'm sure lots of guys have 650 springs. The BTR probably has some. Comp has some. I'm sure PAC has some. Jared, I don't know what you mean by thoughts on cylinder wall finish. Depends on what engine. I don't label anything on the cars I work on, but I do it for a living, so you're used to it. Yeah, if you're doing the same thing over and over and over again, you get good at it. I'm a Omega guy. Ziploc bags with the white panel for use of a Sharpie. Yeah, you just got to make sure that, and this is harder during disassembly, that you don't get oil on everything and that you get oil on the bag so that you can't write on it. So I try to, when I'm doing that, one of my procedures is to write on the bags, because I know on the LS what bags I need. Haven't done it many, many times. And I even will reuse the bags too. The problem is when you reuse them, a lot of times the stuff gets, the label gets taken off or the Sharpie goes bad because you got brake clean on it or oil and stuff. But I'll label the bags beforehand so that when we put them in there, we know which one they go in. Have an issue with tuning LS3 with a 24X reluctor, engines designed for a 58. So doesn't somebody have a conversion for that? And on a Holly, it doesn't matter. It doesn't care what that is. You can program in whatever you want. As long as you remember to spin the cam before you pull it. LS cams are simple. Yeah, I agree. After you can do this after you take the timing chain off and take the rockers and take the push rod and spring load off. You can spin the cam around. I spin the motor around once or twice. I have a big ratchet I use the factory damper bolt, and then I have what is basically, it's a big spacer, but what it is really is a pilot bushing, but it's thick enough. It just acts as a spacer, and I use the factory bolt, put it on the crank, and then I can just spin it with a ratchet and a 24 millimeter. And then I spin the motor over a couple times, just pushes all the lifters up on the cam, and then undo everything and start swapping it out. 460 timing cover bolts are fun. I think I've only done a couple of those. How's our poll doing? 76% on the label side. Label it up. So do we need to have, we'll let our poll go for a little while and see if we need to have some more giveaways. Some other things, like I'm giving away this pen. Or this metric wrench. Could be metric. For doing at-home jobs, it has to be finished in a way for Molly Rings. Said it could be done at home with 3-stone hone. For me, yes. I've used ball hone stuff. Westech has a ball hone that really is sized for a big block Chevy. I've used it for a dozen or more other motors and just ran it. I figure I just made it. I had to make it better than it was, and we spray a little WD-40 in there or put some oil in there, and then hone it, and then I just try to get the speed and the stroke like fairly even, and then clean it all up. I did that with the Trophy 4-cylinder, but unfortunately the Trophy 4-cylinder needed more than that. It needed a camshaft that was all flat at the time. But I've done that on lots of motors and it works fine. I failed and lost so many parts. It's not even funny. I tried having everything in order, taken apart an LS, and everything went bad. Yeah, that's why it's nice to have, like I said, the bags. If you take it apart and put them all in there, you set the bag there. Pretty soon, you just have a row of bags. And you're like, oh, look, we're all the way down to the block now. 486 big block, Brodix, Big Brody, BB2 heads, flat top pistons, profiler single plane, big nitrous grind camshaft, 125 psi cranking pressure. Is it possible to design a camshaft to crutch this issue and give the engine more dynamic compression? Yeah, you can do that. It's going to be a smaller camshaft, though. It's just going to be milder. You're going to have less duration and possibly less overlap. I don't know. I wouldn't be worried about the dynamic compression. I wouldn't be worried about the cranking compression. What I'd be worried about is you need to be thinking about horsepower. Does the thing make the power that you want? If not, then you need to go up in static compression. If it's a nitrous motor, I would try to make is what I recommend people doing. I mean, you can run nitrous on any camshaft, but nitrous adds to whatever cam is there. So if you make the NA power output, make the NA combination more powerful, then you're adding nitrous to a more powerful combination. What you're talking about is going down in camshaft and making the NA combination less powerful. And then how much ever nitrous you're adding, you're just going to end up with less power. You could add more nitrous, but you've made the combination more detonation prone by doing that. Although at that cranking compression is, I don't think you're gonna have an issue. I don't know what octane fuel you're using. Wish I had known about the LS 5-pin VVT cam harness not fitting the 3-pin VVT delete kit from Summit. So it's a factory harness problem then? If we're using a flat tappet cam lifters, you have no choice. Yeah, on the flat tappet stuff, we have like lifter boxes, and then I just label them front, and then we just put the lifters in order the way that they came out of the motor, starting from the front, and then you have a left side and a right side, and that way you put them back on with the cam. Taking pictures of part assemblies, cardboard with the bolts arranged so they come out so that you get the right length bolt in the correct location. Sam, that's a good point. That on some instances, a lot of the LS stuff, the bolts are all the same. They're all the same length. But on some things, they're not. 5-liter water pumps, that kind of thing, where the bolts are not the same length, and you don't want to mess that up. One of the areas that you don't want to do that on are the cam retaining bolts on the LS. They will actually hit if they're too long. They'll actually hit on the counterweight of the crank or something, if I remember right. If you have some of the bolts that are too long for the front cover or the valley cover or the rear cover, they don't tighten the cover. There's lash there. They'll bottom out before they get it tight. He used to try even having the fasteners in order to go back in the same push rod spots. Yeah, I don't worry about that. I don't think that that's a thing. We do too many cam swaps and stuff to worry about push rods, and on a hydraulic roller thing, I don't care where the lifters go back in. I mean, on LS stuff, a lot of times we don't take the lifters out anyways, but if we do, I don't care where they go back in. I don't know if that's been done, but has anyone done an LS3 block with the LR4 crankshaft with the 4.8? The engine size is around 5.5, very over square, can fit some nice LS3 heads on it. Yeah, Alex, I have videos up on that already. I took an LS3 block, we put a 4.8 crank in it, and then we had some forge rods and forge pistons done for it. And I ran cathedral port heads and I ran rec port heads. We ran the high ram stuff on them both. We ran, in fact, that's the motor that we did that went to 8,000 RPM. And I also ran boost on that thing too. Glenn, so your 496 made 664. That's good power then. I wouldn't do anything to it. I mean, if you want to go up in compression, you could do that. My last build, I got new head bolts and they were 1 bolt short. Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I've gone, because Westech has a lot of things there, a lot of extra things there. So when they're putting motors together, they have, you know, a fairly good array of different push rods and things like that. But I can't tell you how many times I've gone there and found push rods that are the right length, plus or minus 50 thousandths or something, and then go to put them on and there's 15 of them. That's frustrating. I'm on the backside of an engine swap out of my gravel driveway. That's not cool. Hard to label everything when you're fighting surprise thunderstorms. Yeah, that's not good. Have you used octane booster on carb engines? Do they clog up the carburetor? All of the octane boosters I've ever seen, you or leave some kind of deposit. I don't know that I've ever used them long enough. Certainly not anything that we've run on the dyno doesn't clog up a carburetor. But I've never used them for extended periods of time where that might happen if it continues to build up. But when you run octane booster, you can see it in the combustion chamber. It definitely does leave a signature. Factory 5-pin harness doesn't like the 3-pin non-VVT timing cover cam sensor connector. Oh yeah, the VVT plug is definitely going to be different, right? Put them all in labeled bags. Any research on Holley pulleys gaining horsepower? Nope, I haven't tested any of that. They should do the cardboard method where you map them out on cardboard, but it took my whole car apart now, and it's that's a lot of cardboard, right? So an upload of a 3rd-gen Coyote with a Whipple making 725, 550 foot-pounds. I've never owned a twin screw, but why such a large discrepancy between the numbers? Do you mean horsepower and torque? Because that motor makes peak power really high. If you want it to make peak power, if you want peak power to occur at 5252, then it will make the same torque. But if it's making peak power at 6,500 or 7,000, but peak torque doesn't happen there, then it's definitely going to make more horsepower than torque. That's actually the definition of it being a good performance motor. If it makes the same horsepower and torque, it's a milder combination. If it makes more torque than horsepower, that's a really mild combination. But if it makes more horsepower than torque, that goes toward the racing end of stuff. And a 6.6 liter truck LT testing coming. I have somebody asked me about doing an L8T test, and so I might do that. I don't know yet. Glenn, do you know what the static compression is? Have you mathed that out yet with your chamber size and your piston dome or non-dome volume? Yeah, Tim, that's right. You'll see it in the spark plugs. I don't know if it's enough to clog anything. Seems more like a stain, kind of like the stains that you see on a. We've seen stains on like cylinder walls. In fact, the first Big Bang motor that I did had a big stain on it. I thought, and we even honed that one. I think we honed the first one because we wanted we reused the rings, but I own the block. And it didn't get rid of all of that stain. But then I realized, hey, you're trying to blow the motor up. So why are you worried about that? You got 460 horsepower and 480 foot-pounds, single turbo. What motor do you think I'm running? Is it a, we know it's not a tune port motor. And it would depend a lot on the boost curve that you have there. But a small block Ford, a modified small block Ford is a lot like that. What do you think about the 78707 cam and an LS1? I don't know what the specs are. If you tell me what the specs are, I don't know the Summit stuff by hand or by memory. So, speaking of stains, we better pick up some new T-shirts. Yes, they are available. We have them for sale. Look, wrong cam shirts. And oh, this is my other guy's shirt. That's right. Here we got red and blue. So those are available, as are $179 cams for all your performance needs. Shout out to the guys at Brian Tooley and Airflow Research and all of those guys. Holly is fire sailing Terminator EFI throttle bodies, $1,000 off. Nice. I used to be able to recite cam specs in my sleep. I can for the ones that I've done a lot of stuff with, but not. I haven't done enough of the Summit stuff. I mean, I've run, I don't know, 10 or 20 of their things, I think. But when is the turbo cam stuff coming? Did you watch yourself on Engine Masters? No, I don't even know that that's on. I wouldn't be. I don't have any notifications for that. Hashtag turbo cam. It's not going to say that. It would say every cam. And I've been trying to figure out a good way to do that. Eric, why? You need to log on to somebody else, Eric, and see if it follows you. 73% are in the labeling. Label. Japan carry trade blew up today. I don't know what that is. I saw that somebody was complaining about the stock market. Does that have anything to do with that? 3/4 turbo cam. I tried complaining way back years and years ago about these turbo cams. Not that turbo cams don't work. I just thought that they're all too big, particularly for the 4.8 and 5.3 guys. I just thought that the cams were too big, that they lost too much power down low. That, yeah, they make like the Sloppy Stage 2, I think is a perfect example. I don't think that that's a good cam for a 4.8 or a 5.3. I think it's too big for, I think it works good. You know, we've tested it enough times now. I've tested it a bunch, and so has Matt. And it's a good like performance cam in that you can make lots of power with it, but it's not I wouldn't ever pick it as a truck cam or something. And I wouldn't pick it as a turbo cam either, unless I was trying to make power at, particularly on a 4.8, if you're trying to make it power at between 7,000 and 8,000 RPM, that's when I would pick a 228 cam. I wouldn't pick that for a car I was driving on the street. Debating if I should drain the 91 fuel and put it in my car or run the octane booster. Had to put 91 ethanol free and Ironhead 10.2 into boat. Backed out a bunch of timing, was still pinging. Was the detonation like at part throttle, or what was it? Because on a boat it's hard because of the load. Edward, you don't get notifications? I was surprised how small the top fuel cams are. That would surprise me. Yeah, that's Dan throwing shade on the X5. It'll be Amanda. Eric, that's fine. It doesn't matter who you. I just want to see if it follows you. I'm a Ford guy, and I'm currently fully rebuilding my 2019 2-liter Elantra due to bearing failure. I'm expecting the engine to be 4 different sections. Yeah, it's a good idea to label all that stuff. It's the first time. Dr. Feelgood, 226, 238. That's a good size cam. Let's scroll back now and see what your question was. For a 5.7. Yeah, a 226 cam that's going to have a noticeable idle. And for me, for a daily driver, I'd pick something smaller. But if it's a manual car and you're a young guy and you want it to rev and make power, it will definitely work. Japan had low rates financing cheap money from Japan gone. Yeah, I'm not part of that world. With bolt-on EFI, have you seen any of the data showing fuel starvation in cylinder 8? And the EFI system would not show that. The only way you could show fuel starvation in cylinder 8 would be if you had 8 oxygen sensors. You'd have to have one for each cylinder to see if that one was somehow getting less or if it needed more. I still have not had anybody explain to me why they thought that cylinder would be getting less fuel, because it's not getting less fuel because of the fuel rail. That's not accurate. $3,000 RPM when all in started 26 degrees, 100 degrees outside. Engine temp was 190. How did you get your engine temp to 190? Is it a sealed system with a radiator and everything in it? Are you not on your boat? Are you not drawing like lake water through it? Top fuel blowers, where the magic comes from. Seeing the flow ratings of top fuel heads. 700 CFM, 1.2 lift. Cams only have a 500 lobe and a 750 valve lift. They're not lofting those valves, are they? But Dan, they have to have they would have to have really big ports and a lot of flow, right? Because of the amount of methanol that they're throwing through that thing. Boats can have freshwater cooling and a regular thermostat. I know you can thermostat it, but 190 just seems like a lot. Open loop, 160-degree thermostat, jumps at idle, no wake zones. Richard, have you used or tested total seal gapless rings? I have used them, but I haven't tested them back to back against anything else. What do you think about the 903 Hemi build that's giving Steve Morse issues? I think he's really, really talented. And if anybody's going to solve any kind of problem that might be there, he's going to do that. I haven't seen anything about it, though. I haven't even looked at that. I'm trying to remember if we even had I'm sure we had a water temp gauge on my boat. I can't remember though. Yeah, Steve is sharp. They're good people though. They know what they're doing. Gapless rings won't make any more power, but they will reduce blow by. But that equals more power though, right? Dan would be the guy to listen to on that, having done some fairly high-end motor stuff where they would test things like that. My level would be more like taking the 300,000-mile junkyard rings out and putting not that in back in, putting something new. Floyd, I'm gonna scrolling back to look at what your thing was. Same price used. Which one would you going for on a small block 393 stroker, AFR 225, or trick flow 20511Rs? I've seen flow rates are comparable. I thought a trick flow 20511R would be more comparable to an AFR 205. I thought a 225 would flow more. But do you have enough camshaft to take advantage of both of those, and enough intake manifold and that kind of stuff? Like those are heads that are 600 plus horsepower heads. So are you making that much with your stroker? What about parts? I've seen a lot of complaints by people on quality. Floyd, what parts are you talking about? I scrolled back, but I didn't see any mention of that. Todd, what's going on? Did you get your stuff done? Have you seen a 12,000 RPM Jessel motor? I have not. Man, I feel like I don't get out there much. I need to get out more. If they're waiting for one more cam. Night. So the water temp gets high at idle. Is the impeller would be a good look too. Can you change the speed of the pulley then? Just parts in general. I don't know what you're looking for. Are you looking for somebody to say that all engine parts are bad or something? Maybe I don't understand your question. Did you look at the AC on the truck? Yes, I do. I did, Dan. And we know. I think we know what it is. It does have the belt. The clutch is engaging, but it's engaging and disengaging. And I called Sanchez, and he said the same thing, that he thinks that it's just low, and so it probably has a leak from last year to this year is when the last time we did any service to it. So I think it just needs to be added, and I have some, and I'm going to try that tonight. Less water pressure from the pump at idle. Yeah, but there's no load though. And so there's no heat generation, or much less heat generation from the motor at idle. If you run a 500 horsepower stroker with a 225 and stuff 14 pounds of boost through it, won't the 225 be better than a 205? No, I would say that that's probably not the case. I don't think that that's the case at all. In fact, I'm certain that that's not the case. If I'm basing it on the results of the test where we tested exactly that, we had a 496 big block, and we ran 315 heads and 335 heads, and the 335 heads definitely flow more than the 315 heads do. And we ran them back to back NA, and then also back to back with a blower, and it didn't make it one lick of power in the difference between them NA or boosted. It didn't do anything, because, like I said, the boost is just multiplying what's there NA. And if you're not taking advantage of what the head has to offer NA, you're not going to be taking advantage of it under boost. There might be some point where you get to that, but we weren't at the 1,000 horsepower, whatever, where we were running this combination. How can you diagnose a fault in your cooling system intercooler on a turbo car to find out what part of the system is okay or bad instead of replacing everything? If you tell us what's happening. Now, those are separate things. Are you talking about the cooling system, like your radiator and stuff for the motor? Or are you talking about the intercooler? Those are obviously separate things. So I would need to narrow it down to the one of those. And then if you tell me what's happening, we might be able to narrow it down. Bobby, can you port the intake on the 5.3 liter to gain more power? 706 head, 2-inch valve. You want to port the intake manifold or the intake port on the heads? That's a question. Compressor's probably leaking between the two halves. Uncle Tony had a video, the great auto parts failure. Another guy had a problem with pistons. Wonder if you've seen any issues. If I had an issue with a particular part, I would talk about that particular part. But I try not to do videos and extrapolate an absolute from one thing that happened to me. If I go to the auto parts store and buy an ignition part that didn't work, I wouldn't then say that all ignition parts are junk or that all parts are junk, or that's not what I do. I'm way too like detail oriented for that kind of thing. If I bought 2 and then 5 and then 10, I would say, okay, this is something that we need to be looked at. And again, I would not extrapolate to all parts. I would just say this particular part from this manufacturer for this application, I'm probably not going to get that again. I'm going to probably try something else. I'm not going to get the AutoZone one if the AutoZone was bad, or the Napa one if the Napa one was bad. Whoever it came from, I would probably not do that. But I wouldn't extrapolate that now all parts are junk, because that's just nonsense. Have you used a UV light to find AC leaks? Most compressor oils have dye in them. I have not. I don't think I have a UV light. Heat soak is what I guess. Iron block and iron heads. Run it hard and get it in a no wake zone and it rises. If I then try to take off with the 91, it pings. Ran 91, no ping. Car seems to get very high coolant temp and manifold temperature within 5 or 10 degrees, even not spirited driving. So do you have is this a turbo or a blower application where you have a big front mounted intercooler in front of it? And then where are you drawing air to go into this NA motor or this turbo motor, or where are you getting air from? We need to narrow this down. Bobby, so you just want to port the intake manifold? Is it a truck intake manifold? I haven't ever seen gains from that, but maybe I haven't done it correctly, or maybe I haven't tried somebody's ported manifold that would work very well. That's just not where I would look. I would look at a different intake manifold than I would look at porting that. We have had 2 different vehicles come in the shop with AC issues. Chevy Silverado and Ford Fusion both had severely clogged cabin air filters, causing the evaporator to freeze up and overpressurize. I should check that was one of the things that when I looked online, that's one of the first things that they mentioned, check the cabin air filter. And having never changed that since I've owned the truck and have no idea if the other guy did that, I can't ever remember even looking at that. I can check that and see. Dye work, so as a sniffer, always look under the bottom of the hood for the racing stripe from the leaking front seal on the compressor. That one's mounted so low, would it, if it had a leaking seal, would it get up to under the hood, under to the underside of the hood? Pressure on your AC is too low. The Schrader or ball valve at the filling port is probably leaking. Change the orifice tube and vacuum it for 30 minutes and then recharge. Buy 4 cans. I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is try to fill it first and see if that works. We did change the Schrader valve before when we changed, because we had to service the system like last year or the year before. I had to change a couple of hoses because 2 of them were leaking. Look for oily AC lines. That's what we had last time. but we changed those to new ones. The AC advice is awesome. Yeah, there's a lot of good AC people here. I rebounded the intercooler behind the radiator support. Is your intercooler in front of the radiator or behind the radiator? Cabin filter, if you have one, a little harder as well. I need to, so let's look that up right now. Well, I can look that up on my magic box. Cabin filter. Is the cabin filters under like the glove box area, right? Hello, YouTube. Yeah, we don't need you talking me through this. I just want to see where it is. See, I go to YouTube to find the cabin filter. Oh, I see. There it is. That looks pretty easy to change. Oh, his looks gross. What I'll do is when I take that out, I'll show you guys on the live feed tomorrow. See what it looked like. You'll get the bottom of the air cleaner ducting oily. Sadly, only have room in the front for 2 small electric pusher fans. Yeah, I don't ever see pusher fans work very well. Puller fans always seem to work better. And then the other problem I see with guys with the car overheating is that when they have big front mounts on them and they just have no airflow unless they have lots of vehicle speed. No hood on the turbo car. I'll get the bottom of the air cleaner ducting oily. Okay. Since I have other leaks from the engine, I think I have oil everywhere. Soapy water mist. Can makes a washable cabin filter. One filter looked like it was full of beach sand, and the other had a rodent's nest and a pound of dog food. Nice. Under the glove box, yeah, Dan, I thought that's where I thought it was. In a Chevy under the hood in the passenger firewall. I don't think the cabin filter is under the hood, right? It's in the engine compartment. I mean, in the driver's compartment. I've got a bank of 4 18650 UV lights mounted together. My 99 did, but all other years did not. The orifice tube is always going to be dirty on the old system. Easy swap as long as lines come apart. Yeah, we put new lines in it. And it had a new valve. Radiators work best when draw through 100%. Yeah, I haven't seen the pusher fans work very well. My 5.3 building using your 510 horsepower build, but the heads it has on our 862 heads. Should I port and keep those or get 706 heads and port those? The 862 and the 706 heads are exactly the same. So if you're going to port them, you got to be really good at what you do to be able to get them to make the flow rate and the power output of the heads that I put on that 510 horsepower one. Those 220 trick flow heads that have been then ported by guys at Brian Tooley Racing, I think you'd be really hard pressed to find another set of cathedral port heads that would be better than that. we have made more than 500 horsepower with ported 706 or 862 heads, but they also have bigger valves and chamber work, and it's a full CNC thing that the guys from Total Engine Airflow did. So you can do that, but it's going to take good ones. GM stopped putting cabin filters in because nobody would change them, and they complained about no air. Pusher fans are supposed to work better on 4th gen Camaro, but I'm with you. Pullers always work better. I've seen guys augment them with pusher fans, but having a big fan or multiple fans that have proper shrouds on them that are drawing the air, because then it has to come through the radiator. Engine drive fans work way better than electric fan. I just took apart and cleaned my AC box on my 80 Chevy C30. Used plumber's putty to seal it back up the firewall. Cool. You can't find those trick load 220 heads anymore. Yeah, a lot of times the trick load stuff is out of stock. Well, just the fact that the thing is cycling on and off, I think kind of tells me that it's low. Big fan of Ziploc baggies. Me too. It works good. Especially oh, you can afford the fancy like slide lock ones. Yeah, mine aren't even Ziploc bags. They're generic ones. They're like getting the big. My wife always gives me a hard time about this, and the kids too. The big bags of like the generic cereal. Like, this is really good. This is just like Captain Crunch. I got 2, but heard Taurus SHO fans are great. I was looking at Mercedes and BMW. Yeah, I would, especially from looking at an older car, any of the newer factory fans have to be a lot better. Canister that collects the water in the system is probably full in your AC system. Where's that at? Ran 2 fans on everything. One is a primary, turns on at 180. Second one goes on at 190. Both come on for the AC. That's a good idea. That's how the factory does it. I was surprised at the difference from some of the factory stuff. I remember driving a factory Corvette way back, and I remember how hot they let that thing get before that secondary fan kicked on. It's pretty hot. It was hotter than I would want it to be. I use freezer Ziploc bags. Any good Silverado complete turbo kits? I don't really have any experience testing turbo kits. I could eat cereal before my teeth broke. No, it's 510 crank horsepower, so it would be probably close to 400. Yeah, it'll be about 100 horsepower is about the number that you're looking at, depending on what kind of transmission stuff that you have. If you have a manual transmission, the wheel horsepower number is going to be bigger. Accumulator truck has a desiccant bag in it to collect the moisture. Is it inside the accumulator? I have a photographic memory and I'm pretty observant. I always remember where they go. That would be a neat trick. Depending on the year of some of those trucks, when they get codes, it turns the AC off. Mine has a code, definitely. Maybe multiple ones. It has knock sensor codes. You change the accumulator if the system was ever open to the atmosphere for any time. Does the accumulator come on one of the lines? What stall would you recommend for the BTR Red Hot Cam? Is this in a 5.3? And then also the cam, if you're trying to make 510 horsepower, do you have a fast intake manifold on it? If so, then something 2800 to 3000 probably or so. TPIs come around 225 to 230. Yeah, I think the Corvette that I was driving was an LT1, and I remember it being 230 ish. The Silverado, it's a big canister on the firewall. Okay. I don't think we changed that. Knock sensor codes. You need to replace the 2 sensors under the intake. Yep. There's a connector upgrade too, and seal the grommets with RTV. Yeah, I'm not looking forward to doing that. I'm hoping that they're not like sealed themselves in there. I'm hoping that they come out. What's the connector upgrade? Is the wiring not good on them? Gonna get a fast manifold. Yeah, those are good. Accumulator also works as a filter. I'm curious now to see what the cabin filter is going to be like. And I'm waiting till it gets a little bit cooler outside before I go and try to, add some to the system. And I got the hose that I got has a gauge on it, so at least I can see kind of where the pressure is. Got it to where I wouldn't even take the intake off, just unbolt it and lift it up with the T4s and sneak everything in underneath. Oh, so you'd leave the fuel rail and everything connected to it? 2x4s? Could you get a ratchet in there and take those off? Water gets into the knock sensors. I know we've seen that problem a lot on the LSs. Mine still has the plugs in it, and there's a lot of oil there from something leaking in the back. Probably oil sensor fitting, I'm guessing. I'm hoping that they're not full of water, but a lot of them are. AC manifold gauge will explain a lot. Difference between copperhead gaskets and Felpro. For what application? I don't normally use copperhead gaskets. So some guys do. Some guys use them for really high boost stuff, along with O-rings. But I've never done that. You should vacuum the AC system to determine if you have a leak. Accumulators on the firewall. It gets in your way when replacing the number 8 spark plug. I remember where that is. Don't wait too long to change it. The clutch will wear out from all the engaging, disengaging. I don't have the AC on anyway. I don't turn it on. I have it all shut off when I'm driving around. I just get hot. If you have a gauge set and can read both sides, I can probably tell you what's wrong. I don't have a gauge set. I just have the gauge for the fill. The clutch is cycling. We already know that it is, because when I turn the AC on, the clutch cycles. It goes on and goes off and goes on and goes off. Yeah, it's cycling, Dan. That's Mark and I both think that it's low on Freon. Vacuum free gauges. Todd, I appreciate that. I like I said, I think if I just add some to it, it's probably going to work fine, and change the cabin filter, it's probably going to work fine. When I get down to Mark's, he has a complete AC system. So if I want to go through all that and evacuate it and refill it, we can and test it for leaks. We can try that. We did a leak test before when we put it all together with the new lines, and it was fine. You can rent them at auto parts stores. Yeah. It needs charging and has a leak. Yep. We'll go ahead and close our pull out at 68% for labeling those bags. You can get a decent gauge set for $50. It shouldn't cycle if it's low on Freon. Everybody that I've talked to about the AC setup says that's an indicator. We'll order a new one-ring kit and accumulator. Your AC sold the whole video. I know. See, that's what happens. If it's low, it means something like that. Yeah, I get that. I know how systems work. We get that. But if I fill it and it works till next year, I'm okay with that. $74 here. Should I turn the AC on? I do AC work. It will 100% cycle if it's low on refrigerant. I think so. Recently, I bought my wife's car. It was low, so I put a can in it, only to realize it was overfilled. That's also a possibility. The gauge should tell me if it's overfilled. I had to take 3 cans out. I don't think it would be overfilled if it's been working good for 2 years now or whatever. Every 10 years or so, you might have to recharge it. Truck I pulled apart had an AC line that wasn't tightened down. It was repaired in the front. Yeah, I'm just hoping for the easy stuff. Clit cycling orifice tube. I was reading 75 psi. That seems a little high. $5.3 gonna boost. Looking for good head gaskets. Looney Bird. I can tell you the setup that we ran on the 1500 horsepower deal. We ran CA 625 7/16 head studs, and then we ran LS9 head gaskets, which the LS9s are probably not even the best choice because they're a much bigger bore opening than the motors that we were running it on. But they still worked. And we had no head gasket issues. I mean, admittedly, we're running it on a dyno and we're not drag racing it, which, guys can argue back and forth about that. I remember I got involved in a discussion on one of the boosted groups, and they were talking about, what's better, a CA 625 7/16 head stud or a 1/2-inch head stud. And I'm like, you guys, I chimed in, and maybe I shouldn't have, but my point was that if you're worrying about that, like the stretch or the sealing of those, either one of those head bolts on a stock block, that I think you're worrying about the wrong thing. I think like I said, if you're at 1500 plus horsepower, I think you're at the limit of the stock block, where you're at the rigidity of problems with that stock block that have nothing to do with the strength of the fastener. Also unplug the pressure switch and see if symptoms change, like turtles. I'm a snake guy. 90% of the leaks I found are the Schrader valves. Still cycling, it'll only be a hair low. I've filled hundreds of vehicles. I've never seen one cycle when it's low unless they were talking like a couple of ounces. Try clearing the codes before you fill it. Todd, I don't think you have to worry about that. You don't have to worry about those. You just have to put boost to the motor and it will be fine. In other news, I've been stranded 5 times this month. What happened to your vehicle? Why did you get stranded? My old car leaked over the course of a year. I just topped it off every spring. The system, the car was not worth replacing the AC components. If you unplug the pressure switch, I'll need to jump the harness. Yeah, I'm not doing any of that stuff. I'm just going to try to add a little bit and see what happens. I'm going to see where the pressure is. I'm going to change the cabin filter. I'm going to see where it is, and then I'll report back to you guys. Last time I bought a Dodge V10. They've been sitting for a year to tow my camper and truck. 2 trips to 800 miles each. An unknown truck. That's pretty gutsy. Install supercharger and chiller kit so you'll be forced to fix the root issue. Lost my fuse panel. Can you use old exhaust valves if one face doesn't match the rest? Yes. I've interchanged valves from junkyard LS heads a lot. What I do is I do the Super Richie razor blade rebuild and put lapping compound on there and put them on a drill and spin them and machine the head. And I just look at the contact patch. If it's got a good contact patch, it seals good enough for the stuff that I'm doing. Grind the valve, it doesn't match. Yeah, you can do a valve job on one of them, and a lot of times we're just trying to put something together to get it to work. And since none of the other valves are good, or they're all pitted and mostly not sealing. If you showed them on the internet, people would say, "Oh, those don't even work. Those won't even seal." And yet, engines will tolerate a lot of leakage. Yeah, I think that the problem, Dan, is that guys don't realize how fast this is happening, and how mostly sealed is good enough. I'm really surprised at some of the things that we've done and how they have worked when we were certain that they were not going to work. Found my 98 350 Vortec has cracked heads. I'm going to have a local shop build new ones. You're going to have them build new heads, which I look for on the pistons to make sure that they're okay. Just make sure that they're not cracked, right? Are you taking the whole motor apart? As the poll goes, no. If you're a professional, you don't need to label nuts and bolts. If you remove them, you will remember. Bags and labels are for rookies. Yeah, that sort of attitude. This doesn't really belong here. That's nonsense. I doubt that there's very many people that have taken apart more junkyard LSs than I have. And using bags is definitely a good idea. And I don't let it affect my my manliness or my status. Two engines, one fuel pump, one blown transmission line, plus my almost new camper blew a tire. Dang. Better to build a three-stroker out of a 5.3 LS or a 6-liter. A 6-liter is going to be a 408. Bag stuff, if it's new to me, I'm not going to put it back together for a few years. I just I like having it all together and organized in the tote because I have lots and lots of engines. So when I go back to it, I know that all of that stuff is not just rattling around in there. Like I said, I know where it goes. But it's nice to go through each bag, put everything together, and then when you're done, you have all these empty bags. On that note, it is time to go. I will see you guys all tomorrow.